Good evening. The South Caribbean Conference is pleased to present this seventh installment of its Surviving a Family Crisis series. And this evening, this program is entitled How to Thrive Over 65, Helping Our Seniors. On behalf of the South Caribbean Conference, its administrators, pastors, workers, and all the members, we would like to wish all mothers around the world a wonderful and blessed Mother's Day. To all our other special guests, we would like to wish you a very special welcome. This evening, we are excited to be meeting with a group of exceptional young individuals who are part of an organization called Bridges to the Heart. Now, Bridges to the Heart is a non-profit organization that was established in 2013, created to restore the relational gaps in society. Since inception, the focus has been on the intergenerational gap between the elderly and the youth in society, with the main project being the Adopt a Grandparent project. This evening, we will have all the members of the board of directors of Bridges to the Heart. And first, I'd like to introduce you to the founder of Bridges to the Heart, Ms. Sasha Bernard. Sasha Bernard graduated from Loma Linda University in California with a master's degree in public health in global health and is a member of the Delta Omega Honor Society. While completing her BSc in biology at the University of the Southern Caribbean, Sasha witnessed a simple event that opened her eyes and her heart to the challenges experienced by the vulnerable in society. And this further led her to start the NGO, Bridges to the Heart. And it gave her newfound commitment to make a difference by showing love. Sasha, are you there with us? Good evening. Sasha, are you there with us?
Yes, I'm here. Afternoon, everyone.
Hey, good evening, Sasha. So from your bio, we've been told that you experienced a simple event. Tell us about the simple event that you experienced.
Okay, so sometimes I feel like if everyone has already heard this story, because it's the story that I tell all the time when people ask, so why you start Bridges to the Heart? What is it about? So basically, in a nutshell, I saw this disabled yet elderly person trapped at an intersection in Port of Spain, and he had nowhere to go because he couldn't ramp up on the pavement because there was no wheelchair access ramp, and cars were like swerving all around him, and he was just kind of like stuck in the middle. And I remember thinking, like, you see these things in movies and it tugs on your emotional heartstrings, and you feel so sorry, but you never actually consider that this is some people's reality. And I remember feeling guilty as well, because while I'm thinking that, hey, nobody is stopping, I myself didn't stop. Right. And it just kind of put things in a different perspective for me. Like, your reality is not everyone's reality. And it somewhat showed me how selfish we are as human beings, that, we actually don't consider the struggles that everyone else has. Like, we know we have ours, but what about other people? And that was the beginning of it.
So tell us, what is Bridges to the Heart about? What do you do?
Okay, so since we've been established, since our inception, we've been dealing with the elderly. So what we want to do is build these metaphorical bridges in society to bridge these relational gaps that we have identified. So we know that there definitely is an intergenerational gap between the elderly and the youth in society. So what we have done and are doing is trying to bridge that gap. So what we have running is a project called the Adopt a Grandparent project. And a lot of people hear that and they say, so they're going and taking the grandparent.
Yeah, I must admit, I was a bit concerned when I heard the Adopt a Grandparent project.
No. We do not add any members of to our household, right? We don't actually take them. But what we do is we visit various residential homes around Trinidad and Tobago, and we form bonds with them. We try for a sort of mutualistic relationship where they benefit from us with the socialization and stuff, and we benefit from them based on what they have to offer us and their wisdom, their knowledge, their experience. So it's not just a matter though of sitting and talking, but we also do various activities with them. So we do gardening, karaoke, bowling, like you name it, we do it. Zumba, all of that, all the fun things.
Zumba, you do Zumba and
Yes,
bowling.
yes. Mm-hmm.
I see. All right, very good. Well, that really does sound exciting. I'm sure a number of 65 and over persons who are watching this program right now are wondering how can they get an opportunity to go and get to take part in these Zumba classes. I'm sure we will deal with that in a little while. Let me introduce the other members of the board of directors one by one. So next, let me introduce Ms. Rayanne Modest. She's a tourism and hospitality specialist and the owner and managing director of Orion Hospitality Agency. Her passion for hospitality was actualized during her program at the Tourism Management Program at TTHTI, which is the Trinidad and Tobago Hospitality and Tourism Institute. Outside of hospitality and events, she serves on the Bridges to the Heart team, which she describes as having brought a new light on caring for the elderly in many ways, and she's proud to be part of it. So let me see, Rayanne, are you there? Good evening.
Hi.
Hello, Rayanne. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much. Next, let me introduce Ms. Janesta Adana McKnight Charles. She spent most of her childhood in Rio Claro, where service to humanity was something that was inculcated in her from a very tender age. This stimulated her desire to assist and defend others, especially the oppressed. On this basis, she decided to pursue her bachelor's degree in law or LLB with the University of London. And currently, she also serves on the Bridges to the Heart team. She has a passion for service and relieving the suffering of her fellow human beings, particularly the elderly. Janesta, are you there with us? Good evening. All right. So Janesta will be joining us in a little while. Next, let me go quickly on to Mr. Kristen Lewis. Now, Kristen is an entrepreneur and a financial risk advisor with 5 years of experience in insurance, investment, and small business development. He has been the recipient of numerous company and industrial awards, including the prestigious designation of being a $1 Million Roundtable member. Currently, Kristen is a scholar and he's pursuing his FCSP designation, which is a Financial Services Certified Professional at the American College of Financial Services. His love for the elderly and his genuine appreciation for their contributions to society compelled him to join Bridges to the Heart, where he serves on the board of directors. Kristen, good evening.
Hi, good evening.
Good. Thank you for being here with us. And finally, we have Mr. Justin Matthew. Justin is a MSc candidate in the area of counseling psychology, who loves music and the outdoors. Since completing his BSc in psychology at the University of the Southern Caribbean, he has served as a counselor at various health centers within the Northwest Regional Health Authority. He has also been featured as a speaker on various topics, including mental health, the elderly, and family life. Justin currently serves on the board of directors at Bridges to the Heart and believes it provides a platform to promote and provide generational equality for a better society. Justin, are you there with us? Good evening.
Hi, good evening, everyone.
Justin, thank you so much for joining us. So before we get into this evening's program, I'm wondering, Justin, if you could offer a word of prayer for us.
Sure, no problem. Right. As far as possible, let's assume a posture of reverence. Heavenly Father, we thank you, Lord, for this day that you have given us. We thank you for family, for health, and for strength. As we go through this evening service or program, I pray that someone will be blessed by it and get some knowledge or information of how they can take care of their elderly parent or even elderly citizen in a caring home or so. So we thank you, Lord, and we pray that everything would go smoothly. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen and amen.
Amen.
And
Now, so we're dealing this evening with how to thrive over 65. And I must admit, when I heard the age 65, I thought to myself that 65 really is not that elderly. I mean, when I was in my teens, it seemed very old. But now that I have parents who are about 65, it really doesn't seem that old to me. As a matter of fact, the way that they act and they behave, it seems as if they're still in their mid 40s or 50s. But nevertheless, the science is telling us that persons above 65 are part of a vulnerable population in relation to COVID. So, Sasha, let me ask you here. Tell us a bit about the elderly and COVID-19, and how can people who are 65 and above help reduce their risk of contracting the virus?
Okay, so thanks for the question, Randall. As you said, the statistics are showing that the elderly are disproportionately affected. If we look at some of the actual statistics in the US, there have been approximately 78,000 deaths from COVID-19, which is the actual illness caused by the coronavirus. 8 out of 10 deaths are actually those in adults over 65. With the numbers presented by the CDC, the percentage of hospitalizations and admission to intensive care was significant in adults aged 65 and over. Even in Trinidad, where both fortunately and unfortunately, we only had 8 deaths, reports show that 2 patients had no details. No details were given, but the remaining 6 out of 8 were also elderly persons. So I think that's very significant. And we've been hearing the term vulnerable population used to describe the elderly generally and also specifically as it relates to COVID. Something to note though is that it is not chronological age alone that determines how a person does when faced with an illness like this. I like to describe the COVID vulnerability as being influenced by 2 factors. So would be with the increase of age comes the decrease of immune system functionality, right? And then the second is the fact that there is a higher risk that they, meaning the elderly, would have pre-existing conditions like diabetes, heart disease, and lung disease, which can be accompanied by some level of frailty and which ultimately will increase their risk of severe complications if they contract the disease. So basically, all of that is just to say, if there's an 85-year-old who is otherwise healthy and strong, as we would say, they may actually be more resilient in fighting off the infection than a 60-year-old who has many chronic conditions, right? So if we look at the symptoms, right, COVID-19 is typically signaled by 3 main symptoms: a fever, an insistent cough, and shortness of breath. But what we realize is that doctors are now saying that these underlying chronic illnesses can actually mask or interfere with the signs of infection. So some older adults have atypical symptoms, meaning not the symptoms that everyone else may have or the common symptoms, which actually complicates the efforts to ensure that they get timely and appropriate treatment. So you see, that's a little sticky situation there for them. But with our country reopening phase by phase, it doesn't necessarily mean that the virus has disappeared, but it does mean that it has been contained enough for us to return to some level of normalcy. So reducing the risk of contracting the virus and avoiding all the complications that may arise with it is possible with good planning and following some of the same precautions that may be put in place for someone who is younger. So meaning that the precautions are not necessarily based on age. So I'll just run through them very quickly. I know a lot of us have heard them already, but know what's going on locally, especially from credible sources like the government. And even though you should wash your hands frequently with the 20-second limit as advised, still try to keep your hands out of your face and your mouth, right? Keep yourself well, have a healthy diet, exercise, take care of your mental health and your spiritual health. stay at home. Just because outside is slowly reopening, it doesn't mean that we should venture out of our house unnecessarily. We still need to have some level of essential in our trips, right? Clean surfaces clean surfaces that are touched frequently, often. So if we're looking at the elderly specifically, right? We look at their walkers, their canes, wheelchairs, handrails, things that they need to support that are touched frequently. Make sure that these are cleaned. It cannot be emphasized enough. Practice social and physical distancing, but not social isolation. So we need to keep them safe, but also keep in mind that the social isolation can have a negative impact on their immunity and also, as we will learn later on, their mental health. A tricky one is to postpone unnecessary or non-essential doctor visits. I am not a doctor, so I'm not going to say what those may be. I'm not going to ascribe which visits are necessary and which visits are not necessary. But I would say that everyone is different. So stay in contact with your physician. Find out, they may offer telemedicine, right? Which with the advancement of technology now, and follow their advice. But make sure that you are stocked up on your meds. So it doesn't cause any disruption in your actual treatments, etc. And the last one that I would say, as you can see with the cut off all non-essential travel, particularly cruises and trips with itineraries that would expose you to large crowds.
Right. Thank you very much for that, Sasha. Now, you started speaking there about the physical impacts, physical challenges that person would face. But you also mentioned mental health. And I think this is something that Justin can help us with. So now, Justin, I have a number of friends who have parents as well who are over 65, and they're telling me that their elderly parents don't want to stay at home. They have certain routines, they have certain ways that they've lived their lives for the past 40, 50 years, and they don't want to change it. They want to go out, they want to go to the market, they want to socialize. And it seems as if it is very important to their own mental health to continue these ongoing activities. So what are some of the coping mechanisms that elderly persons can use to help preserve their mental health during this COVID crisis where you require some degree of social distancing?
All right, Randall, and good evening, everyone. First and foremost, I just want to say that I just want to say the obvious that these aren't normal times that we live in. You can tell every day that this is very strange times that we're living, and for the elderly to be in these coping mechanisms that you would have made mention to before, we need to know first and foremost that anxiety is a normal emotion. Okay, anxiety usually heightens when we are faced with uncertainty, unpredictability, and a feeling of not being able to control our environment or even our circumstances. So this virus outbreak, or COVID, as we all know it, is certainly going to magnify during this time, especially for the elderly. So I could probably give some key pointers as to how can we steer the elderly, because you would have made mention too before that there are certain and particular routines that they would have been involved in before the crisis. So, for instance, we want to limit your media intake. All right, so you can write that down wherever you are. Those of you who are taking notes, limit your media intake, and basically, as adult children of the elderly, or even as caretakers in these homes, we want to give clear-cut information about how we can help the elderly reduce their anxiety and worry during this time. Remember, they're hearing information about this bouncing all over, and they would interpret certain things through their eyes, through their lens, and through their understanding. So you are to break down for them and explain to them sometimes 3 and 4 times based on their cognition ability. So you want to encourage all adults as well that have, because not all would not be able to do that, but we want to encourage all adults as well with experience and special skills to help others by providing virtual support. Let's say reading a book to a child, whatever skills that they can support, so they can feel a sense of or a sense of responsibility, or a sense of to cope with this, to cope and preserve with their mental health during this COVID crisis. So you also want to provide a practical and emotional support by, as I would mention before, sharing simple facts about what is going on. All right. In addition to that, I would say that we want to look at the digital connection. We live in a world that's very digitized, and of course, we are worried about mommy. Of course, we are concerned about daddy. And so we want to see them in the best of conditions. All right. So definitely, folks should look about this by checking in with them. So if they are at home, we can probably give them a call, even video call as well. We have that technology. If they are at a nursing home, for example, work with the folks in the nursing home or the facility to understand when it's safe to visit. For the elderly at this time, it's very strange. It's a very strange time, as I would made mention to you before. It's a very strange time. So, things like making that social connection. I know we use the term social distancing, but I think we should not social distance, but physical distance, and be socially connected
Right.
during this time, because the elderly, they definitely need it. They need to know what's going on. There are people with feelings, with emotions, and you can talk to them and express what is going on. And finally, I would like to touch a bit on exercising. Exercising is a very good thing to do, especially for the elderly, to keep fit, to keep moving. And thanks to online videos, the elderly can find lots of workouts that is specifically designed for them. So these workouts will basically help reduce their stress, lift their spirits, keep them fit and active while in quarantine. So just because you're in quarantine doesn't mean that you have to stay isolated from everything and separate in a corner. No, get involved, find out what your mother is doing, find out what daddy is doing, get the elderly moving, get them involved, and so they could feel a part, they could feel connected with you can feel connected with elderly members, family members, elderly friends, or neighbors, so we can cope through this tough situation better.
Yeah, thank you very much, Justin. Now, as you were speaking, and I want to throw this out to everyone on the panel, because being from a particular generation, online and using computers and these different resources comes naturally to everyone here who's on the panel. And even my parents, who are in their late 60s, they can use it. But my grandmother, who is in her 80s, um, I'm going to have a real challenge getting to do any exercise that they have on the computer. Regardless of how many times I show her how to use the program, she's not going to learn it. And it's not because she can't, it's because she doesn't want to. Now, what advice would you give to people to overcome these kind of challenges? And anyone on the panel, how do you get around these sort of issues to make it more effective, these proposals that you put forward?
All right, so I could probably look at this, and of course, one of my colleagues could also share a bit about it. But I believe we could look at it in a very find creative and innovative ways during this time. So let's say, for instance, maybe you can take a video of yourself exercising and play it for her. Or you can even find time, even if she's not mobile or he is not mobile and can't get up, you can sit down next to her and let's say, okay, let's lift this water bottle up, mommy. 1, go. 2, go. Next time, 3, go. Just so they have some sort of interaction and connection, as opposed to just the virtual realm of things. Or and you can also get your grandchildren involved as well. All right, they might be more privy, or they might feel more welcome in sharing in on this. So you can say, let's go by grandmother or let's go by grandfather and organize and exercise with them, have some sort of movement, have some sort of interaction with them during this time. That's one way I would say that we can create that environment, that space for them to do such activities.
All right. Wonderful. Anyone else want to join in or no? Because I know that's a difficult one. I really can say it is a difficult one. I've had some friends who have been complaining, and of course it makes sense that their elderly parents are not listening to them. Their elderly parents always remind them who the parent is and who the child is, and indicate that they do not. They hear all that their child is saying, but they are big people and they know what they want to do. So we may have to come back to that a little later on. I think I want to get a chance here to bring Janesta into the conversation. So Janesta, can you tell us a bit about what the government has put in place to help protect the elderly during this pandemic, and what they can do to access these services and benefits?
Okay, so good afternoon again. The government has mandated that the geriatric homes implement visitation policies to protect the elderly. You see, most of the elderly either have compromised immune systems, making them therefore at a higher risk, right? At higher risk, sorry. So, in an attempt to protect them, they basically sought to reduce the amount of visitors, and eventually they stopped all visitation.
Yes.
Now, as Justin would have highlighted earlier, we will tend to do less physical visitation, but more socializing. So it is important, as much as they would have stopped visitation, possibly to the geriatric homes, and advise that you, in terms of the elderly who are more likely to be at risk, would be you visit them less. We could still contact them using different methods, the non-traditional methods of communication, possibly to them. So as we would have highlighted earlier, they mightn't want to use technology, but desperate measures are needed in desperate situations. And this is one that we have been challenged with. Therefore, possibly speaking to a grandchild or a child via a tablet or another device, any grandparent would prefer that as opposed to anything. Further, they sought to implement earlier hours of visitation, whether it's to the bank or to the grocery stores, to facilitate the elderly, to ensure that they are not stuck in long lines, to ensure that they don't have to face the general public who might put them at risk, but they could access the services that they would need, but that are necessary without such hassle. But as Justin would have highlighted, it's an all hands on deck approach that is necessary for this pandemic. Therefore, other than continuing to ensure that we socialize, although it might not be physically, we as the younger generation could attempt to assist the elderly, whether it's by helping them do their errands to avoid the risk of dealing directly with the public, whether it's through the banking system or whatever way. But as I said earlier, desperate situations call for desperate measures. So I must commend the government, even at this time, for what they would have put in place to protect the elderly citizens.
No, Janessa, thank you very much for some of the measures that you pointed out. I myself, I haven't been out to see it, but the measures that were put in place, for example, at the banks, at the groceries, and supermarkets, where they have separate opening hours for persons above a certain age. How have those measures been working? Have people been utilizing it?
Like you, I sought to obey the government's stay-at-home policy, but from my observation, I think that it is working. Other than that, other businesses, in terms of corporate Trinidad, sought to assist, whether it's by delivery services, and many other measures were put in place. But in terms of, I think corporate Trinidad has really assisted the government in ensuring that this was a successful endeavor.
Yes, yeah, I agree. As a matter of fact, just this evening, I ordered groceries for my mother. We went and picked them up this evening before this program started. My parents got home about half an hour ago with their car full of groceries, never having had to step foot within the supermarket.
So I guess you could attest to the success of some of these programs.
I can. I am not allowing my parents to go around anyone who can possibly give them COVID-19.
That's great.
I've told them I will go out and I will face whatever virus germs may be floating around, but they must stay safe where they are. I like having them around, so I want to keep them around for a much longer time.
And I agree. I hope more persons take on such roles and responsibility. Yeah. So thank you for standing up for the elderly.
I'm just doing my part. Now, let me bring Kristen into the conversation. I know he's eager and willing to go on. And the topic that Kristen is dealing with that I want him to look at is one that troubles me, especially as I see my own parents getting older. And it has to do with financial abuse toward elderly persons. Because it really has been my observation that some very enterprising persons in our society spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to defraud elderly persons of their hard-earned money and resources that they've taken a lifetime to build. So, relative to the risk of financial abuse toward elderly persons during a crisis such as this, Kristen, can you give us any tips, any pointers, any ways in which this can be avoided?
Yes. Hi. Good afternoon or good evening, everyone. First, Randall, I would like to commend the South Caribbean Conference for taking a proactive approach towards with real issues head on. And when I say real issues, not just issues in regards to spiritual, mental, emotional, or health, but also financial. Before I get into the question, I would just like to dissect it into about 4 parts to kind of give the audience points that they could take away with.
Sure.
We're speaking about financial abuse. When you think about financial abuse, what comes to mind? And basically, it's the controlling of someone's ability to acquire, use, or maintain their own money. That sounds like a scary thing. Imagine you, after working so hard or after doing everything that you would have done, someone is now trying to control or tell you how to spend or what to do with the money you've earned. What I would like the general public to understand is that financial abuse is a form of domestic abuse. Yeah. Financial abuse is illegal and once identified should be reported.
Yes.
And normally when we think about domestic abuse, we normally think of the physical, sexual, psychological, or emotional. But financial abuse falls right under or right in those categories. And I think that is something that is worth mentioning. Now, as we get specific, we're dealing with the elderly this evening. So how does financial abuse affect the elderly? And I've listed some ways, but what I've listed is not limited to, but I'll share some examples so that the listening public can have an idea.
Sure.
So it's a scary thing where the money or the property of the senior is used or taken without their permission, where some seniors are removed from their homes for the use of the abuser. Deposits of things like pension and benefit checks does not go to the authorized beneficiary.
Yes.
Signatures are being forged. So I guess Adana would probably have an understanding of what are the implications on that regard. Seniors are coerced into signing documents, deeds, those things against their will in most cases. Sometimes out of fear and sometimes out of the belief that they think that this person really cares or has their best interest at heart. Monies are borrowed from senior citizens, so monies are borrowed to do things. Granny, I need some money borrow. Auntie, I need some money borrow. I'll pay back in a reasonable time. But it's never done. You'd realize that at this time, really, persons would be tasked with the opportunity to, or be tasked with the responsibility of going and doing things on behalf of the elderly. Change is not being given or returned. So things like that. So financial abuse of the elderly is something that happens within and outside of a crisis. So it happens all the time.
Sure.
But what we wanted to look at, especially for this conversation, is how does financial abuse or is financial abuse heightened in a crisis? And can it be avoided? The answer, simply put and unfortunately, is yes. So financial abuse is heightened.
What, Kristen? Yes, it can be heightened,
Yes.
or yes, it can be avoided, or yes to both.
Yes to the both. Yes to the both. So we're saying on one end yes, which is a little disheartening. But yes, it can be avoided, which gives me a little joy. And that's why groups like Bridges to the Heart, we're here to help with those challenges that we may experience. So during a crisis, you hear World Health Organizations, the CDC, Ministry of Health, and several bodies and organizations list the elderly as the persons most vulnerable. Most times when we think about it, we think about things like health. Justin touched on the mental health. Sasha spoke about the physical health. But according to the National Council of Aging, financial abuse accounts for millions in losses annually. And among the most of abuse, or among the abuse towards the elderly, financial abuse is actually one of the most prevalent.
Yeah.
So as much as in our mind we see that physical abuse, mental abuse, emotional abuse, and we tend to give those things a very high priority, which they should. Financial abuse is also one that we should pay a lot of attention to in terms of giving high priority when it comes to our elderly or senior citizens. When I thought about it, this coronavirus pandemic is difficult for all of us, Randall.
It is.
It has changed, as Sasha would say, the way of doing things. As they would put it, we have a new normal. But it's more difficult for those who are in abusive situations. And that's unfortunate. Because what it does, because of the change, it gives the abuser the opportunity to control the victim in various means and various ways. Some of these ways you'd find the elderly persons are now very more dependent on the family members or caretakers. If incapacitated, you'd realize they would be almost clinging to these persons for any source of sustenance or means of help. Most times at this point, the elderly persons might be immobile, medically vulnerable if exposed. And lastly, at this time, when you think about it, as Justin said, there's so much information coming in from different sources. They are more trusting of the people that are around them. So when you add up all of that, you realize that if someone is not in the hands of someone who really genuinely loves and care about them, you realize that they can be exploited, taken for granted, and financially abused. So I gave you all the dark side or the bad side, but thank God we have some hope. The question is, can it be avoided? And I would say, yes, it can be avoided. Yes, we can work to solve the problem, fix it. And how so? When you spoke, Randall, you mentioned something that warmed my heart a little in regards to you care so much for your parents that you will not allow them to go outside, or you will not allow them in the direct line of fire.
No.
And it says to us that there are good people out there, but we need now a collective effort in terms of ensuring that the persons who are out there get the support that they need. So, firstly, some of the ways that it can be avoided is that with all types of abuse, if you see something, say something. Recognize if there's an indication or there's a thought in your mind that this person might be manipulated or may be experiencing financial abuse, say something, alert someone. Secondly, Now, elderly people are not very versed when it comes to technology, but convenience is a significant thing. Now, I work with some elderly persons in my private form of employment, and you hear certain statements like elderly persons like to go to the grocery, they like to go to the bank, they like to do these things. I've had a chat with some of them, and they said that's the only time I get to go. That's the only time I get to meet Sandra and Dawn and Paula and these people. So to take that away from them, we might have a challenge. But what we can do is the banks and the financial institutions, we could set up things like standing orders, where elderly persons would not have to go to the bank as much. We could do things like automatic withdrawals, to pay things like bills, to pay things like monthly utilities, those things. So we almost putting them in the driver's seat. We putting them in a position where, yes, they're dependent, but they could take care of some things themselves. We can help them by journaling. So we might not be able to go to them, but we can ask them to keep a journal, and we could communicate with them on a bi-weekly basis. And what we're listening for anything that doesn't add up. We're listening for names that keep coming up very recurrent in regards to I lent so and so money, or I sent XYZ to do this to me, and you want to monitor those situations very carefully. The last thing I would say, we have to understand, and I think Justin touched on this, is that we're all going to eventually, once life permits, get to the point of aging or get old. And it's important to recognize that patience is one of the most important things that we could use when it comes to the elderly population. They don't always get it. They're sometimes very stubborn. They are the parents at the end of the day, so they'll remind you of that. But what we can do is work with them, because as we would feel someone working very hard for our monies and being able to spend it in the ways that we would like, we have to understand that they are people too, and we want to give them the same freedom that we would want for ourselves. So these are the methods that we've come up with, or that I've come up with, as ways that this, or the abuse of the elderly financially, can be avoided or mitigated.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Krista. Now, at the heart of everything you're saying there, the abuse that occurs, it has always struck me that it appears that as people get older, other people seem to start to take a claim to what older people have worked for.
Right.
And it appears as if at some point in time, people start to feel entitled. So Granny owns a house, but that house must come to me. Yes?
Yes.
And in my profession, you see a lot of times where families are torn apart because they are literally fighting, both in and out of court, both physically, verbally, for assets that they didn't work for. Now, you've told us about some things to do. That can you spot what? Can you tell us, or can any of you think of any of the warning signs to spot people who might have these sort of intentions? Are there any behaviors that these persons may start to exhibit toward older persons? Any behaviors they may start to, or any attitudes they may start to display towards older persons, such as something like an early warning signal?
Right. I would have mentioned it briefly, but I would touch on it a little now. And Justin and Sasha and Ray and Adana could chime in as necessary. One of those early signs is that you would hear the elderly person repeating or repeating this person's name very frequent when it comes to conversation, asking them to do certain things, very dependent and reliant on them. So that is one of those things that you could keep your ears open for. It might not be a family member. Right. It could be a distant friend. It could be a young man or a young lady from down the street, or that kind of thing. So we want to keep our eyes or ears open for things like that. The second thing I would say, how do we track it? The journal is very helpful. A journal is, one, building the confidence of the elderly person is very important. But two, the journal allows us to or allows the elderly person with your guidance to keep track of things like money lent, money withdrawn from the bank, different things, or grocery lists and those things. So it really give the elderly person, you're not taking away that independence from them. So a lot of us would like to help, but they feel helpless when we try to do too much, and it's a balancing act, because we don't want to neglect, or we don't want to make them feel helpless. So we find a way to offer assistance, but also give them the ability to feel or to know that this is their money, they are in control, and unless they pass that responsibility to you or to anyone else, we want to make sure that they feel they see that sense of authority over their property. Yeah. So I don't know if anyone wants to share when it comes to this.
I could just chime in here. I think it's somewhat of a risk if we were to list characteristics, that you may want to look for, because that could lead to us also wrongfully accusing people who may be innocent. But what I would say is that I've never experienced it, but I think that Kristen would have mentioned to some extent, but there needs to be a certain level of accountability. Something that you can account every step of the way, what was done, why it was done, and have proof of it. So whether it be a grocery trip and a receipt is given, or you go to pay a bill and the receipt for that is given, but that level of accountability that shows that you are transparent in your transactions. Right. I think that could be something.
Yeah. Now, the reason I ask these questions is both from personal experience and professional experience, right? And just as a point of departure, very quickly, even with my own parents, we've noticed a strange phenomenon over the past year or so, where persons may visit church, for example,
right,
and then come and try to invite themselves home for lunch at my parents' house. Persons not attending the church, that don't know them, suddenly will walk up to them and try to invite themselves home. That's and of course at church we invite people home, but correct. It's strange when persons who don't even fellowship at your congregation suddenly come, choose the people that they have had no conversation with, and try to invite themselves home by them. And it has happened to them not only in church but also in the grocery. And so I've been noticing small patterns developing, where I see that people are trying to profile them to see where they are at, what's going on at their home. And this is why the question came to my mind about early warning signals, because I believe if we are proactive, we could also reduce the possibility of financial abuse. Now, before we go on to our next questions, I also would like the listening public to be aware as well that under the Trinidad and Tobago domestic violence legislation, financial abuse is an offense. Financial abuse is one of the ways in which domestic violence can be perpetrated, and it refers to a pattern of behavior, the kind or the purpose of which is to exercise coercive control over a person, or exploit or limit a person's access to financial resources so as to ensure that that person is financially dependent on you. Right. Understand? All of it is all focused on coercive control and behaviors where persons are trying to make elderly persons financially dependent on them. So you collect the person's old age pension, and then you decide how they spend it. These things happen regularly, and it's something that we really need to be on our lookout for. So, Kristen, thank you very much for drawing our attention to these things. Now, let me move on now to ask Rhea now. So we've spoken about physical challenges, we've spoken about mental health, we've spoken about abuse, we've looked at some of the factors, the things that the government has put into place to help with seniors to deal with this COVID crisis. So, Ryan, I'd like to bring you into the conversation now. In terms of what is being referred to as social distancing, that Justin tells us we should rename to physical distancing, not so Justin? What are the challenges that elderly persons and their families face in relation to this social distancing in light of COVID-19?
Hi, so good evening, everyone. So as everybody probably had mentioned before, and yourself, seniors are very active. Most of them are active. They love to go to the market on Sunday. They love to go to the bank, as Kristen says, and meet their friends. They love to be outside. They love to go to the savannah and so forth. So getting them to be inside is going to be a task
Yeah.
because they will feel conformed inside. They have this way of, if I go outside today, I may not go outside in the next week or so forth. Even with homes where families come and they take them away for the weekend and so forth, they can't visit their families. They are now conformed to that home. They also wouldn't be able to, let's say, be with their families if they are home. I know of a guy, he lives with his parents and they're over 65. He has
Right.
taken a decision to live somewhere else for the time being because he is an essential worker. So going out there and coming home and interacting with his parents is something that he cares about.
Yeah.
So he has taken that step, and many families would have taken that step to protect their elderly parents. Also, homes that have put the restrictions on visiting them, families now will have to call in or video call, as Justin would have said, to keep the interactions between the elderly. So for this whole social distancing, it's not about being social, it's the whole physical distancing, but also keeping in contact with families. But some families may have it difficult by leaving their parents home alone, even those, as you say, who may not be within the whole technology vibe. They may just know how to dial the phone and call rather than using WhatsApp or Zoom or
Yeah.
to interact with their families. So it's a bit difficult, but I believe with time they would learn and families would keep the social distancing but physical distancing.
That's right. That's right. So, is there anyone else who wants to add anything in relation to that particular point? I'd just like to
I
add.
wanted to mention as well
Sure.
the elderly is what I would say the large group that any how to put it in churches, they are the largest community. So for them right now it's very difficult with their prayer groups or other groups that they would have been in. They are
Yeah.
now confined to being home and doing online, watching online servicing or having their caregivers do it for them so they can be in with everyone. And that's a kind of what I would say difficult for
Yeah.
many of them because they love doing this. This is something that they will practice doing like their entire life, every Saturday, every Sunday, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Completely agree. Now, tell me your views on this. And as I said, it's something I was listening to the Prime Minister's address that was aired yesterday, and he indicated something that I found interesting about sometimes you may want to wear your mask at home, and I was wondering whether this is a practice that persons may want to adopt when they are around elderly members of their family, especially if they've had to go to the supermarket, they've had to go to work because they're an essential service, and even now as things are opening up and more people are going to go, oh, is it something that you all may think people should consider? Whether when they're coming into contact with their elderly parents, grandparents, whether they would wear a mask at home when they're around them.
Yeah, I would say that that's something to put into practice because I am an essential worker and dealing with the public. Also, even I believe I come home, I wash my hands, I take a bath, I shower. You do not know what has transpired on you. So, therefore, wearing a mask and dealing with your parents is something that I believe would be the new norm.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody else want to chime in on it.
I think that it is important, but to some extent, because realistically, you don't expect to live with a mask on. But we do need to act as though we have the infection when we're dealing with not just elderly, with each other. So the necessary precautions, even if not necessarily a mask, but the hand washing, so I know some people, they take off their clothes at the door. They don't even let the contaminated clothes, come in. So simple things like that, could also be put into practice. I know that the homes, according to the government, in the mandates that would have been given by the Ministry of Legal Affairs, they said that you can't visit the elderly homes. However, if you do have something to carry for them, whether it be a meal, a snack, anything to, I guess, alleviate their discomfort during this time, you are allowed to do so. So I know that they do, though, encourage the mask wearing in a situation like that, because you are now going to them. And the mask, even though it's not 100% foolproof, as in, it can't protect you, like it's not guaranteed to protect you fully, it does reduce the risk of spreading the germs, I guess. So, you just have to know when and where, time and place kind of thing.
Right. Anyone else want to chime in on this particular issue? Because as we are on the issue of health now, Sasha, I actually wanted to ask you, relative to senior citizens and their lifestyle, how can their lifestyle at this point in time help them cope with COVID-19?
Okay, so that's a very deep question, as in, there are many realms to it. But before I answer, I would like to say two things, which are two sorts of disclaimers. The first one is, I think that there's a fair amount of ageism when it comes to the elderly in crises. Even if people don't say it, they think it like, well, they don't live their life already. We tend to not put as much emphasis on protecting them as protecting ourselves, because we think they have come to the end of the road, That's the first disclaimer. And the second one is that we would have all touched on it in our talking about COVID specifically, but generally, in order to help someone cope, whether they be elderly, whether they be a baby, whether they be mid-age, we need to understand what they are dealing with. And we also need to be able to identify the signs that may indicate that they are not coping well on their own. So if I want to be very rude and blatant, I would say we don't want to be pushy and ignorant. We need to understand and be able to identify, because the pushiness comes from us thinking that they can't handle it on their own, because that's not the case. A lot of them are quite capable to handle crisis on their own, right? But then we also don't want to assume that they're either too independent and we don't want to help. Either end is either extreme is not good, right? So how can a senior citizen's lifestyle help them cope? Two cliche phrases: your health is your wealth, and prevention is better than cure. Now, I did public health, so I am going to be very biased, and no offense to any doctors or medical practitioners that may be listening, but I believe, right, that if we do it right the first time, we can avoid the problems, and therefore we won't need to find solutions to the problems, right? So we wouldn't need the medication, we wouldn't need to visit the hospitals if we just get right the first time. Right. So I'll touch on three things that I believe that that they can adopt in their lifestyle to help them cope if that time arises and need just general coping. The first one will be a proper diet. A proper diet and healthy lifestyles go hand in hand, in the same way that optimum health and good coping go hand in hand for everyone, but especially for adults over 65. I was reading, and the WHO was saying that a majority of the diseases that older people suffer from are as a result of lack of a proper diet. So we need to ensure that healthy choices are made. And the thing is that a lot of times, and I want to be very presumptuous by saying this, the healthy choices are often the more difficult choices or the more expensive choices. So it's much easier to just do what is convenient and what is easy, but it may be unhealthy. So if we look at the diet of an older person, we want to ensure that it's balanced. So you want to have carbohydrate-rich foods like your provision, your oats. We want to have protein-rich foods, your meat, your fish. If you're a vegetarian, your beans, your peas. We want to ensure that we have fresh fruits and vegetables. Now, we live on an island, so technically, we should have no excuse to not eat fruits and vegetables. Like the other day, I went out the road, essential. It was a grocery run, right? And I bought some pak choy seedlings, something as simple as that. You know, we have no excuse not to eat fruits and vegetables. And then, in addition to those things of having a balanced diet, we want to make sure that the food we eat, they are nutrient rich or nutrient dense. So we want to have like our bhaji, which is rich in iron or calcium, right? Magnesium, all these vitamins. So we want to technically avoid high calorie food that lack vital nutrients and eat nutrient rich foods, right? Drinking enough water a day. I mean, we've heard it enough times, 8 glasses a day, minimum, right? Hydration is very important. Some people don't like drinking water. Water is not the only way to get hydrated. Eat a piece of watermelon, suck an orange, drink some soup. As much as it may have sugar, drink 100% juice. Make a fruit smoothie at home, but stay hydrated, right? And then additionally, we would like to limit our salt and sugar intake because we know those things are also risk factors for developing non-communicable diseases, diabetes, hypertension. Another thing to focus on though, with as it relates to proper diet, is that there are a lot of age-related challenges that hinder proper nutrition. And as a young person or someone who is not directly experiencing it, we may not consider it. So something such as poor dental health, you know, we may put a plate of provision or cassava, you know, sometimes cassava could be real hard in front of our grandparent and we wonder like, why they're not eating it? But we're not considering, hey, they have dentures. Maybe it's very uncomfortable for them to eat. The discomfort that they experience from eating is probably not worth it. You know, sometimes the side effects of their medication, they may have nausea and it may just totally turn them off from eating at all. So we need to be aware of these things when we do promote good nutrition to them and a proper diet. We also want to look at physical exercise, physical activity, because this not only benefits physical health, but it also contributes to mental health, quality of sleep, mood, self-confidence, and brain health. And I know that a lot of us can attest to that, not just for the elderly, but balancing physical activity and a healthful diet is the best recipe for optimum health. You could do one without the other and you'll be good. But for the optimum health, the two go hand in hand, right? Actually, a recent Swedish study found that physical activity was the #1 contributor to longevity, to add an years to your life, physical activity. So personally, I know for me, I have decreased years on my life because physical activity is not part of my daily regime, which is a problem. So, you know, set a goal. And this is for me, this is for you, this is for everybody who's listening, right? Set a goal, right? Try to be physically active for at least 30 minutes a day. Right. Even if you do 3 10-minute sessions, just try to get it in. Rianne would have talked about, it was Rianne, yes. No, Justin, I think it was, about lifting the water bottle. Sometimes, you know, do squats with a broomstick. Use what you have. Sometimes you're always on the phone. For me, I'm not old, I'm not an older person, but sometimes when I'm on the phone, I walk around the house. Something as simple as that, you know, walk around your garden, walk around your yard, and that gives a certain level of aerobic exercise. So if you're currently inactive, it will be good to start with something as simple as that and then gradually increase as you become stronger. Right? And then, I mean, as another disclaimer, always check with your healthcare provider before starting something new because you don't want to overexert yourself. You don't want to put yourself at higher risk for something else by trying to be healthy. So, you know, always check in with them. And lastly, the last point I want to make is a matter of being prepared. We need to be prepared for crises that may occur. And for the elderly, a crisis might not necessarily be what it is for someone else. So a crisis for an elderly person could be a sudden stroke or a heart attack or something, you know, that comes literally out of the blue. And according to the CDC, there's something that they call, I think it's a care plan, right? That improves the overall medical management of someone. So basically it summarizes that person's health conditions and treatments. So let's say, for example, you're a diabetic, your care plan will have, you are diabetic. These are the medications that you are on. These are the doctors that you currently see. These are your emergency contacts, whether it be a spouse, whether it be your children, whether it be a neighbor, and resources that can be used to assist should an emergency arise, should a crisis arise. So maybe that's just something that we can all work on by just being prepared, having that along with your important documents like your birth certificate, passport, etc. But just be prepared should a crisis arise so that you're not left out in the dust.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Sasha. And it struck me that the majority of factors that you spoke of would affect all people. It really would, if you were to implement those things in your life at an early stage, it would effectively add years to your life, because you spoke earlier about your chronological age.
Yes.
And based on what you also said, based on your own confession a while ago, that your lack of physical activity would have increased your age. What you were saying is higher than your chronological age. Is that what you're saying?
Oh no, I was saying that it would decrease the number of years that I can wish to experience in this life.
Right, by making you effectively older. That's what you're saying.
Yes, yeah. And by probably cutting it a little short.
Well, so that means Dr. Hilda himself, and so you'll have to take your own advice after this program is ended. Now, I'm seeing a question online, and I imagine this will go off to anyone. And this person is asking whether or not we have enough hikes in church. And I want to broaden that a bit, because it seems to be saying, how do we have, as churches, do we have enough activities that encourage physical health and well-being in terms of getting up and going? And especially in our context, do we have enough of those that the elderly persons in our churches can go to? Because we have hikes, but I'm not certain how many of our over 65 population can go on some of the hikes that we go on. So what do you all think about that?
Yeah.
Do we have enough physical activities for our older population in church that can help stimulate and benefit their health and well-being?
I think yes, but I am speaking solely based on my church. So I attend USC, and the Health Ministries Department of USC actually have a program called Fit and Faithful, and they cater to all ages from 0 to 100. The trainers that they have do tailor the exercises to your age. They have chair exercises. So if you can't walk very far, you can stay on the chair and do, everything. So I think that's, even if not all, at least come to USC. That's a plug for USC, the Caring University Church.
Anyone else wants to boast?
I would also like to chime in here.
Justin, you were saying something about
yes, but I believe that I wouldn't be speaking about Tunapuna, although we have been doing that. Just putting that out there. But for the most part, I have been aware that most churches do have physical activities after church. They have it in the evening time, and they have physical activities where they have a conductor, and they eat healthy fruits for sure. So they have best of both worlds. They have the fruits, and they also have the physical activity. Even on an early Sunday morning, I have seen churches take activities in the same nature. So yes, there are churches that are having activities, the aerobics, the burnouts, and I believe as well hikes as well. Just so that the person that said, are there hikes in our church? Yes, there are hikes in our churches. There are hike groups, and they happen.
Yes.
So I will give a different perspective on the matter because I'm from Rio Claro.
Right.
So as opposed to these city churches, if I should use that term, we in the countryside.
Right.
How should I put it? A bit less of that challenge. So you would find our physical activity would be more involved in agricultural activities and other things. So yes, the elderly, they are kept active. However, I would propose that there be more social bond between the generation gaps. However, in terms of their activities, I think they are actively involved. So as they would have said earlier, I think based on the different places, it would differ.
Yeah. So there you have it, folks. If you want to be healthy, Go to a country church. This is what I'm getting from it.
You will exercise and eat.
That's right. And you know, and what you're necessarily saying is truth. It's one of the sad facts of modern society. When you live in a city area or more urban area, you spend more time inside. You spend less time doing physical activity as part of your normal and natural daily routine. So what Jonas is speaking about is that the people in her church, they get in their physical activity all the time. You know, and that's really something to be commended. Now let me move quickly on, because there's something, Justin, that we haven't touched on yet. We've dealt so far with the elderly and them dealing with certain things, their mental health. But dealing or helping other persons often carries a particular toll for the caregiver. And I was wondering whether you can give some advice, some assistance, some waypointers for persons who are helping to care for elder family members, and especially those who may have some sort of dementia or some sort of physical infirmity. What advice can you give them to help keep up their spirits when they're dealing with an elderly family member?
So taking care of the aging parents or the elderly during a crisis can be very overwhelming. Regardless if there's a crisis or not, it can be a task. You can feel a sense of being burnt out. And then you might even hear the question, nobody truly understands what I deal with mommy or daddy, or no one really understands what I go through with this elderly person. For the nurses over there. And then you ask another question, what happens when your parent asks you, who are you? What happens? Isn't that a frightening thing, Rhonda? When your mother turns to you or your father turns to you and asks you, what or who are you? It's a very scary thing. And so I want us to be very aware of the sadness that you feel around your parents as they are growing old and you as well are growing old. All right. So you want to learn how to communicate with the elderly. All right. You want to be very clear on how you communicate with the elderly. There might be a range of experiences or feelings or emotions that you might be feeling during this time. All right. As far as I see it, we as children were taught how to receive from mommy and daddy, but you were never taught how to give back. That's a very key thing. So those of you who are taking notes, you could probably put that one down. But as far as I see it, yes, as far as I see it, we were taught how to give. We weren't taught how to give to them, but only to receive. And so when we see mommy starting to bend her back or begin to slow down her speech or begin to forget a lot, you begin to feel a mixture of emotions. And so we need to understand, or we need to be educated, or the awareness needs to be raised in how we deal or how we communicate effectively with the elderly. Because through our lens, we might be saying it has to be done this way, it has to be done that way, but through their eyes, it might be totally different from how you see things. So you want to talk to your aging parent or the elderly in a very calm. You are concerned. We are all concerned, but you want to talk to them in a very calm, in a compassionate and patient and caring way. Sometimes you have to ask 3 and 4 times. That is okay. That is just their way at this stage in their life of how they are dealing with things. And I believe that if you truly care for someone, person that you would have raised you from small, you would try to understand how you are dealing with her through new perspectives and new lens. Another thing that I would like to look about is boundaries. Boundaries. That be with boundaries. You want to avoid becoming overtaken with your parents' problems by setting healthy boundaries. Some folks might feel even guilty that they didn't see about mommy or daddy, but you want to ensure that you have those healthy boundaries, ensure that you're seeing after them, ensure that you're putting things in place for them. But at the same point in time, you need to find out where exactly does that, before you hit a brick wall, you don't want to hit that brick wall at all. So you want to make sure, where does your life start and where does their life start? You have your children to raise as well. You also have your career to see about. Those of you who are in your professional fields, but you also have mommy and daddy there. So you want to have a schedule, or you or set a routine for them as well, so you can help cope with this period in your parents' life. Remember, you are getting older and they are getting older, and so you want to be cognizant of that fact. Another thing that I want to look at, that sometimes most of us want to play heroes. Yes, heroes. So I want us to say it together. Don't do it alone. That's correct. You don't want to do it alone. All right. So there are many support groups that are out there that have family support programs that can help you at this time. Also, I am a firm believer in stories. There are many caregiver and taker stories that express what is going through at this time. How do I deal with my mother? How do I deal with my father at this time? How do I deal with my elderly parent? And through these stories, they could act as a booster or a motivation for you to help deal with your own situations with your mommy and daddy, or at the elderly home with the elderly that are there as well. So they can give ideas to reduce this caregiver stress that you might be facing. So I just want to go through those 3 points again. You want to be aware of the language that your mother or father is speaking, or the elderly are speaking. You want to set those healthy boundaries, as well as don't do it alone. You can seek help. There are groups. I'll just call one, for instance, the Alzheimer's Association. They also are key in this area as well too, that can help you see about your parents during this time.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, Justin, as I have you here, and it's a question that I have heard asked before. It's something I've seen with my own eyes, and I thought that this might be a good platform for us to look at it. And a number of persons who take care of their elderly parents, for example, make the statement that their parents are miserable. I'm certain that people have heard that. And I've often wondered, how is it that
Randall, I didn't get that clearly. Sorry.
Sorry, they say that their parents or elderly person is miserable. Yes?
Okay.
They say that they're miserable, and you alluded to it earlier when you said, where people say, you don't know what I'm going through when I have to deal with mommy or I have to deal with daddy. Right? And I've often wondered, if you have a parent who was loving and kind for their whole life, how is it that they suddenly are being characterized as miserable in their later years? What is it that is actually happening? Is it that your parent has suddenly decided to become difficult, or is it something else? Is there another explanation that can help put their behavior or their actions into perspective?
All right, Randall, that's a great question. First and foremost, I would look at the mental cognition of that elderly person. Throughout their age, that may deteriorate. So we have to be conscious and cognizant of that fact. All right, that's a very important thing. So I think that as children with aging parents or dealing with the elderly as nurses or doctors, you have to be mindful of that and educate yourself with regards to that. That's the only way that I see going forward. Because remember, you might be seeing things through your eyes or your perspective or your lens. But further than that, you also want to try and educate yourself. What is actually happening to her? Why am I getting the blank stares? Why is she drooling all of a sudden? And within you, you may be feeling mixed emotions because you never saw your mother or father in that condition before. So that's kind of tugging on you. That's pulling on you as well. So what can an adult child do? You can get educated. There are groups as well, such as Bridges to the Heart, that is there to help provide that kind of help, as well as other groups to help focus on that transition that your mother or father or the aged person might be facing as well. Right? So that's something that we can consider and that we can look into to better equip our generation, to better equip our society in dealing with the aged and seeing it from their perspective and putting things in place to better their end of year living.
Yeah. No, thank you very much, Justin. Now, as we're talking about end of life, as we're talking about persons are having their cognition starting to deteriorate. I want to bring in Janesta now in relation to this point. From a legal perspective, can you give us an insight into wills, powers of attorneys? How can these instruments or these type of legal documents assist in helping to protect elderly persons during a time of crisis and generally?
In addressing your question, I would first highlight that wills and power of attorneys and no law, and they are not only important for the elderly, but for everyone. You see, wills, let me define it first. So a will basically activates at the death of an individual, giving who we call the executor or the executress the legal right to act on their behalf, meaning to dispose or to deal with their resources, whether it be property, etc., based on what they would have advised in their wills, right? As opposed to a power of attorney, which basically is active during the person's life. So why I highlighted that powers of attorney and wills are not necessarily for the elderly. Emergencies occur. So for example, as young as we may be, an accident could occur, or probably someone could have some sickness or some sort of thing that would interfere with their mental states or their physical states where they are unable to make certain decisions on their own, on their behalf. So when you put a power of attorney in place, what you do is basically have a seamless transition to even if you have a will in place. So a power of attorney basically gives someone the right to make decisions on your behalf while you are alive, whereas the will gives the person the ability to make decisions on your behalf as well at your death, right? So I'll first define how it could be, how it could be done. So basically, to get all done, you go to your attorney and they would basically advise you on the protocols or what is necessary to get it done. However, you as an individual, and in our context dealing with the elderly, you would know exactly how you would like to dispose of your assets. So you'd have an idea, I would like to give Jane this, I'd like to give John this. And this is important because what tends to happen is most people will die and it causes conflicts in the family because people mightn't meaningfully seek to cause conflicts or confusion, but in trying to basically give their parents to carry out their parents what they think is their parents' right. They and mixed with emotions as well. There's a lot of emotions. It's a recipe for conflict, and most family conflicts arise at this time. So parents can ease, or not only the parents, but both the young and the old could prevent this by putting the legal documents in place in terms of a will, to prevent this. Also in life, the power of attorney would help alleviate such problems. Justin would have dealt with dementia and these things, right? And in reality, if a power of attorney is implemented, you now act as the mind of your parents, obviously understanding the parents and their desires. You would be able to make decisions that are well suited. I would use this in contrast with our will for you to understand clearly how important it is. For example, when a will is not created, you go to the court and you basically seek to get what is known. The what is known as the appointment of an administrator. So that's basically the courts now choosing who will be the administrator of your estate, as opposed to you choosing the executor of your estate and basically giving them guidelines as to how to dispose of your assets. So, similarly, with a power of attorney, somebody you care about, somebody who would have known you, somebody who would have understand your way of thinking, your morals, your values, they would be in the best position to make decisions on your behalf as opposed to a stranger. In terms of the legal implications, something as simple as you being unable to go to the bank and sign. If you don't have a power of attorney, someone can't sign on your behalf unless there is a joint account. So there are lots of things that can be detrimental to not only the elderly, but each of us. So it's something that we should all contemplate once we start to acquire some sort of assets.
Now, Janesta, and of course, extremely important in relation to the power of attorneys and wills are that these documents be created and executed when the elderly person, at a point in time when they're still healthy and their mind is still clear. Because we don't want to give the impression that there's something to be done when you see the person on death's door and you try to get them to sign any document. Because that was straight into the financial abuse that Kristen was talking about, speaking about earlier, right? It is something that we need to implement, and I see it all the time. It is something that really that people need to implement as early as possible. Get your wills in order, and beyond that, once you see your parents getting to a certain age, it may make sense to get a limited power of attorney so that you can transact certain business on their behalf. That is what you are suggesting. Not so, Janesta?
Yes, and I should highlight that there are two types of powers of attorney. So you can get a power of attorney to deal with your property in terms of someone to make decisions on your behalf, based on how to dispose of, how to deal with your property and also to deal with your personal care. So as Justin would have highlighted earlier with the dementia, that is extremely important because with your memory failing, simple medical decisions, simple things like that, you can't make those decisions. You are not in your sound mind. So it is extremely important.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Lester. This is something that people really need to focus on. So we're talking about wills, we're talking about powers of attorney, and it clearly leads us into financial issues. So, Kristen, relative to financial management and insurance, what advice can you give relative to these two issues in a time of crisis such as this relative to elderly persons, right? So from a financial perspective,
so thanks.
Tools, insurance tools are available.
Okay, so thanks for the question. And in my attempt to help the listening public or understand from a financial perspective what tools or what help is available, I would like for us to first define what is financial management. And it speaks to the process of planning and managing one's financial activity. So when we think financial management, we think of a process. And when we think about this process, I want to highlight that this process is not only in crisis. So yes, we're dealing with a crisis. Yes, we're dealing with the elderly. But when it comes to planning, as we all would know, planning takes time. And for this particular point, I would warn persons of only planning when they get to that state of being an elderly person. So when you think about financial planning in regards to the elderly, I would actually want to come back a little and look at financial planning in regards, or financial planning on a whole. So the first thing I would look at is, in regards to financial planning, I would advise that one seek a professional. Finance is a touchy subject, and we've touched on it already. Finance is the one area that we believe that whether or not we're doctors, lawyers, or whatever professional, that we can handle ourselves. When it comes to our money, we like to take care of it, we like to handle it ourselves. So I would admonish persons to seek the help of a professional. Understand your income, understand your expenses, create a budget. So what we're looking at is just the tenets of proper financial planning. Create a budget, create an emergency fund, create investment opportunities, or to create a plan, not just for the short term, which a lot of people do, but create opportunities for the short, the medium, and the long term. And then it speaks to planning for retirement. It speaks to, as Adana said, planning for, unfortunately, planning for your passing, planning for death, planning for illness. I say all of this, and when we look at proper planning and the process of proper planning, something that comes to mind, as you mentioned, Randall, is insurance. Now, I've been an insurance professional for the last 5 years, and it's not the topic that everyone likes to speak about. I'll be very honest. It's either, you see, and that is fine, because it's not something that we like to think about. When it comes to insurance, it's something that we think we could, or we hope that we could delay. But when it speaks to insurance, it speaks to an agreement with a company, or with a company and an individual, to deal with crisis. And we see that crisis is the underlining word through the conversation. So it's an agreement to deal with crisis, damage, illness, death, to give a specific payout at a specific period. Now, we all know what is crisis. It's a breakdown or disruption in the normal. It happens most times suddenly. If you were to ask in December 2019, what we most had in our mind as the 2020 we would have experienced, COVID-19 had no pity in that. It was, I would even say 2020 was the year that everyone felt that would be the best year of their lives. And what happened, there was a sudden disruption, a sudden disturbance of the norm, and things change. Now, how do we all tie this in together? We're speaking about proper management, financial management, we're speaking about insurance, we're speaking about crisis, and then we'll touch on the elderly, which are the most, which is the body of the conversation we're having today. When it comes to crisis, you'd realize that crisis happens suddenly. And you look at crisis, a pandemic, an emergency, an illness, a death. When you look at that, you look for the best measure, you look for the best financial instrument that could now mitigate against this financial crisis. So I would want to tell the listening public that if we're talking about dealing with crisis, something that happens on the spot, we now need to have an instrument, a product, that once something happens on the spot, will activate on the spot. Follow me? So what we now discovered is that insurance does something that is unique to insurance. And what it does, it creates an instant estate. And most people ask what that means. What is an instant estate? An instant estate, simply put, it creates an entitlement to the beneficiary the moment it happens, whether or not the crisis happens 1 year or 20 years after taking out the policy. Now, you're asking, well, Kristen, what is the benefit of this? So in my professional opinion, the unique feature of insurance is suitable for dealing with crisis. It's suitable for dealing with things like medical challenges, loss of income, unemployment, disability, illness, and death. Now, what I want to touch on is proper financial planning and the elderly. Now, Justin touched on it beautifully. proper plan or anything that is productive or successful requires planning. I think we touched on that. Now, when it comes to aging is a process, and financial planning is a process. So let's tie those two together. Now, it is not prudent that you plan for your retirement or you plan for your aging in retirement. So what does that mean? It means that the 5 of us or the 6 of us in this conversation, all the listening public and everyone who will see this video, it means that proper financial planning is something or has to start now, because we don't know when a crisis could happen. We don't know when something or an uncertain event could happen. But what does that mean for the elderly? When you think about the elderly, Sasha touched on the care plans, but care plans need financing, to access proper medical care, proper doctors, proper facilities, so that our elderly population are not exposed to, for want of a better word, the general healthcare system. So what we have to do is now think about it from a proactive approach in terms of how are we going to prepare for that elderly, for that time when we all become elderly. The thing is, a lot of our parents may not have had those things in place. Things were not as sophisticated as they are now. So what you'd find is that you might be retiring at 65, but your parents may need to go in an elderly home, may need nursing care, may need a little extra assistance. In your mind, one of your planning consideration has to be the care of your family members and loved ones. Now, it's an awesome responsibility, because how do you now plan for what you're dealing with, your growth, your development, your family, and now dealing with, okay, maybe mommy or daddy might need a little extra care. Maybe mommy and daddy might need some extra assistance. So what I've tried to get persons to understand is that as you plan for your own retirement, as you plan for your own financial future, you also have to plan for the financial future, the successful financial future of your parents. And in doing so, planning, I can't say that enough, planning, seeking the help of a professional, because we can't do it alone. And in doing so, I guess we can mitigate or we could solve a lot of problems when it comes to elderly and the financial resources available to take care of the stuff that they need. I think you're muted. Okay, good.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kristen. I'm very happy that you've put it into perspective and once again emphasize that planning is key, right? Advanced age is not something that should take us by surprise. It is something that we should plan for. It is something we should look forward to, and we need to plan for it so that we can enjoy our later years. So thank you very much for
let me just say, in regards to enjoying our later years, I think I need to say that enjoying your later years is your responsibility, and I'll put that plug there, because when you think about enjoying one's later years, a lot of the comments that we would get, or you would get, or persons would say, is that my NIS is good, my company this is good, and that kind of thing. But when it comes to the total protection of your finances, each of us have to take a personal responsibility in ensuring that as much as we exercise, as much as we do things for our mental and social health, as much as we plan, that we take a personal responsibility in ensuring that when it comes to matters of elderly healthcare or retirement healthcare or retirement planning, we take a personal responsibility in ensuring that we do our best to ensure that at that time we're very comfortable.
Yes. Thank you very much, Kristen. And I really would like to thank the members of Bridges to the Heart for joining us on this program. It was personally for me very informative, and I thoroughly enjoyed our session this evening. And I'm certain that the listening public as well would have benefited from the discussion and the breadth and the depth of the discussion and the various topics that were raised this evening. Before we go, I'd like to ask Janesta, would you offer a word of prayer as we close our program this evening?
No problem. As we bow our heads, thank you, Father, for your presence. Thank you for an opportunity where we can deal with real life issues. For Father, you are a real life God, and you have given us wisdom and knowledge to deal with these issues. Father, even as we are in this time of crisis, we pray especially for the most vulnerable or elderly community. And we ask that you visit them even at this time in their various homes, wherever they may be, and continue to protect them and guide them. For Father, they have a wealth of wisdom that they need to share with us. Continue to be with the others. We ask that you intervene in each of our lives and direct us. Amen.
Amen. So once again, we'd like to thank Bridges to the Heart for joining us. To our listening public, we want to thank you for joining us for this special program on Mother's Day 2020. Next week, our Surviving a Family Crisis series, we will be joined by Dr. Oscar Ochoa, who will be dealing with the topic COVID-19, my health, my responsibility. See you next week for this very important topic, and thank you for joining us. Good night.